It's good to be back with Pole Stream on Channels Television as we gear up for the gubernatorial and state houses of assembly elections happening this Saturday across Nigeria.
Yes, indeed. Pole Stream is that part of Channel TV's election coverage program, The Verdict, which brings you trends, topics, and reactions from social media. Welcome to the program. I'm Mayowa Ugundili.
And I'm Victor Matthias. But first, we must appreciate you, our viewers, for being wonderful during the presidential and National Assembly elections.
Definitely.
Of course, you know, you made Pole Stream the talk of the town. And we urge you to do so once again by sending your reactions, your messages, as well as videos to us via the handles, of course, which is at Channels TV. There you go. They're showing on the screen at Channels TV, at Oluwamayowa, of course, as well as at Victor_MBIDI, using the hashtags Pole Stream, The Verdict, as well as 2019 elections.
And don't forget to include your name and location. And of course, once again, don't forget to use those hashtags. Now let's get down to business as we take...
Well, before we get down to business,
Okay.
I mean, I'm a gentleman. Today is International Women's Day. So, first of all, happy, as a woman.
Thank you.
Of course.
And to all the women watching us,
colleagues, our mothers, it's
girls.
Happy International Women's Day.
Happy International Women's Day.
Let's
get down to business
Indeed.
as we take your feedback to a question we posted online. What improvements should INEC, the police, and even citizens make for the March 9 elections? Now, here's what some have said. We have at K-Toned from Twitter who said, as long as there are powerful, irresponsible, and unethical politicians hell-bent on holding on to power, thereby recruiting and arming equally senseless thugs, there will always be trouble during elections, irrespective. Really strong words there.
Indeed. The next one is from Slying, of course, on Twitter as well. He says, with less than 48 hours, which was counting out from yesterday, to the gubernatorial election, a body that couldn't plan well for 4 years will never listen or correct anything now. The professors should just start calling untallied and inaccurate figures already SMH.
And SMH means shaking my head. And when I saw that, I thought INEC will need to win a lot of more people over with their performance this time around.
Yeah, that's right.
Another tweet, this one from Yunus Mujahid, who said, the number of police officers at each polling unit should be increased. Also, they should be armed accordingly. It is reported that some officers at the polls were not armed during the last election.
Yeah, but talking about being armed, there was also that debate when the president said, shoot ballot box snatchers outside. If they're armed, they could be trigger happy. You just never can tell. So, mixed feelings here and there. But the next one is from Olowoni9. He says, or she says, they should maintain peace and order, which is absolutely...
We definitely endorse that message.
Very well.
At Lord Raz, he said, hope INEC Nigeria representatives are in Rivers State, seeing how the build-up to the 9th March gubernatorial elections is going. Soldiers everywhere, let's vote, not fight. Pray for Nigeria. And then, of course, the hashtag, The Verdict.
The Verdict. Well, let's take a look at another social media platform. This time around, we'll take a look at the messages from Facebook. And this one is coming from Africa Hall of Fame.
Interesting name.
Absolutely. Well, it says, come up with a system where people can vote from the comfort of their homes. Have a system where if you vote multiple times, only the last vote should count. Talking about,
that's the dream we all have. Yeah. We can't wait to get to that
diaspora
point.
voting
Definitely.
From the comfort of your homes.
Hopefully that comes sooner rather than later.
Indeed.
Another message, this time from Laura Edokobi Ikeobi, says, results should be counted and announced at the polling units to avoid rigging. CCTV cameras should be mounted secretly at polling units. Now that, I think that's a good idea. But I don't know how much that will cost if you had to, install secret cameras at all polling units.
But it's for the good of the country, so why not? If the resources are there, why not? Why don't you do that? But the next one is from Patrick Imohimi Danny Ken. He says, please, channels, kindly ask INEC about the money allocated for the police dogs. I haven't seen any police dog on election day.
Well, maybe it's not where you are. Maybe it's
somewhere
elsewhere.
Else. Well,
Inamdi Charles said, nothing to improve at all. Just dismantle the manual voting system of ballot papers and introduce electronic voting. If I can be accredited electronically, why can't I still vote electronically?
Well,
questions, and more questions.
Hopefully, INEC will answer them sooner again rather than later. But the next one is from Bugewa Kurene, and he or she says, Let there be armed security men at the junction of every polling unit, because the presidential election made me notice that without arms in the hands of policemen, they are as weak as the civilians. So military men should be stationed at strategic locations. If you remember one video that we saw from Okota where a police officer was outnumbered by thugs and he was trying to get things in order.
He was helpless.
Yeah, he was helpless,
like.
actually. So, I mean, but again, people will say they shouldn't be armed.
It's a dicey situation.
I know. But moving forward now, like we always tell you, that Channels TV is your home for breaking news as well as other stories. But there have been stories coming up on that platform, which is our website, channelstv.com. And again, people have been reacting to some of those stories. And the first one we're going to take a look at the reactions from is the one from the Air Force chief, where he talked about how the Air Force is stepping up measures to ensure peaceful conduct of the elections. Maya will get us started.
We have Madolf Abike, who said, seems we are under a military regime where the soldiers participate in an election. This is terrible. Can Nigerian government emulate the Westerners who brought democracy to us?
Well, the thing is, not too long ago, people were talking about arming
people. So yeah. You see, sometimes it feels like it's between a rock and a hard place. You can't satisfy everyone.
Indeed.
And I do know that our security agencies will be working to give us the best that they can.
Which is what we expect. But the next one is from Martins Moscow, and it says, is election now a war zone in Nigeria? Army and Air Force are now making comments of peaceful elections as if it is Sambisa Forest where Boko Haram lives.
Next says Njoku, this is from Njoku Christian. Sir, what actually concerns the military and democratic elections?
Well, in fairness to INEC and the military, I mean, INEC was using the Air Force to transport electoral materials to some parts of the country. So there's a correlation.
Play their part.
Indeed.
Pretty much.
Indeed. Well, the next one is another story that was posted on channelstv.com and also shared on our social media platforms. And it says the federal government closes land borders ahead of governorship, state assembly elections. And of course, people have been reacting. The first one here we have is from Clement Ajay, and he says, please, you forget that only Boki in Cross River has more than 100 footpaths to Cameroon with no security operative mounting any. How do you deal with such areas?
Big question, and I do know that our security agencies will be watching and they're taking note.
Indeed.
Adi Rahila said, Awanye said, of what use closing the borders? Those that will still rig the election are in your domain. Effort in futility. Well,
I don't think so.
Some people don't believe. No matter what you do, some people won't believe.
Well, the next one is from Nsidibe Usoro, and it's another question. It says, does Nigeria really have borders?
Big question.
But indeed, we do have borders. It may not be, as mounted as we would want it to be and stationed as well. But, I mean...
Hopefully we'll get there soon.
Indeed, we'll get soon, hopefully.
Interesting reactions,
indeed,
really, from our viewers and those who follow Channels TV online. Now, to address some of these security questions that have been raised, let's bring in an expert, a security expert, Olatuboso Abolariwa, who joins us from our Abuja studios. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, and thanks for having me.
Great.
Indeed, you're welcome to Polstream.
Now, to kickstart this conversation, I know that you've heard some of these messages that our viewers and people online are asking. The question of should we have more soldiers out there at the polling units? Should we have more policemen armed? All these questions. What's your take on all these?
Okay, before I give my takes on that, let me just join you in wishing all the women out there happy Women's Day.
Indeed.
Thank you.
I pray that the country and the continent will appreciate you more as the one who brought us here. And let me now come to your question. The issue of having the military or the paramilitary armed policemen, armed soldiers around polling unit or in the affairs of election and democracy is just a minus on the general security situation of the country. Electoral activities have a soft security code, which means that there are people, there are materials, and there are property to be protected. But before the election, there are similar activities going on. We have the JAMB, we have the common entrance, we have the WAEC, where the material and the people who are managing it needs to be protected too. Do we have cause to deploy the army in all those? The presence of the military in electoral activities really calls for attention. It is happening, but it is not something that we need to sustain. We really need to put more effort into how we go about our democratic activities in such manners that the presence of armed men, the presence of ammunition is going to be brought down to the minimum. Talking about the incident that is happening all over the places, like in Uyo and other places where electoral building and installations are being vandalized and destroyed, also calls for attention too. I want to look at the readiness and preparedness of INEC itself to know what measure have they put in place. Was those places not secured? The fact that it happened before the general election, that is the presidential election, that houses were burnt. What proactive measures was put in place in all those INEC buildings to prevent and preempt this? And who has been brought to book for all these vandalisms? Those are questions the security agencies and the INEC needs to really ask themselves. It may be too late for this particular election, but for the subsequent election that we're going to be having, we want to know what effort is being put in place to preempt and prevent this from happening.
Now, speaking of that Uyo situation, I do hope that our security agencies will swing into action and make sure that other hotspots that have been identified before now will be, properly secured. Now let's bring it to the citizens, because at the end of the day, people are involved in all of this.
That's right.
People who would come out to vote. And I'd like to ask you, what role should they play? If you recall the situation in the Okota area in Lagos, the last time, we saw videos on social media, and I was wondering, in a case where that happens or repeats itself in any part of the country, what should citizens do, and how can they even use technology to fight violence?
Okay. The insecurity, if I should put it that way, that is happening around polling units may not be far off different from the level of insecurity that we have across the country before the election period. The citizen has first major role at the polling unit that if you are a registered voter and you wish to vote, make sure that your primary aim at the polling unit is to go there, cast your vote, and leave. You don't have business around the polling unit. There are agents of your parties of interest there to protect that interest for you. So crowding and staying and building up tensions around the polling unit is not something that I will advise. And when tensions start rising up, it might lead to issue of loss of lives, properties, and injuries, which can be avoided.
Mr. Abolariwa,
now, when you talk about
Mr. Abolariwa, let me just hold you there for a bit. Just hold your thoughts. We'll take a quick break, and of course, when we come back, we'll come back to you to give us more on that. But for now, we'll take a quick break. I'll be back in a moment. Please stay with us.